Good evening and welcome to Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. In tonight's broadcast, we'll take a look at the steadfast spirit of the people of Ambazonia, a nation that continues to chart its own course towards self-determination in the face of relentless attempts at distraction by the colonial regime of La République du Cameroun. For decades, Ambazonians have endured not only political deception, but also a brutal campaign of militarization, killings, and displacement, acts many describe as genocide. Yet through the pain and the pressure, one truth has remained constant. The focus of Ambazonia is liberation, not participation in colonial theatrics disguised as democracy. Now, while the regime in Yaoundé cycles through its stage elections and empty promises, Ambazonia stands unwavering, committed to a future defined not by oppression, but by sovereignty. Tonight, we bring you the stories and developments that remind us why the struggle for Ambazonia's freedom remains the true mandate, and why no amount of colonial spectacle can shift the compass away from Biya. With that, we'll head on to the prime headlines. Headlines on Undaunted. Tonight, the French Cameroun military yet again tortures unarmed civilian, this time to death in Biya County. ID card frustration mounts at Molyko Colonial Police Station over colonial ID cards. While the voice of Ambazonia, Paul Biya, and the comic show is what we'll listen to as Dr. Martin Mungwa, Secretary of State for Communications and IT, shares another editorial. Ambazonia rejects the La République 2025 election theater as Joshua Osei sells participation to a disillusioned public. And across Africa, Ugandans question the United States deportation agreement amid lack of transparency and political concerns. News across the globe tells us Australia cuts ties with Iran over state-directed anti-Semitic attacks on Jewish sites. With that, we're heading into the full briefings of Undaunted tonight. Do stay tuned. A young man, Desire Kwakeki, has reportedly died from injuries sustained after being tortured by La République's colonial military forces in Nkar, Biya County of the Savannah Zone. Local sources say the military thugs who were present during a community football tournament accused him of being a separatist fighter, and the incident, which left the community devastated, triggered a lockdown by Ambazonian fighters. Now, the peaceful atmosphere of a local football tournament in Nkar, a village in Jakiri, was shattered when La République's military officers apprehended a young man, Desire Kwakeki. According to local residents, the tournament had been a unifying event for the community. Operating without incident from either sides of the ongoing war. Witnesses claim the colonial soldiers mistakenly, as always, identified Kwakeki as an Ambazonian fighter, a common and often tragic mistake in the war-ridden southern Cameroon by the colonial forces. Now, despite desperate pleas from tournament organizers who attempted to intervene, the military talks subjected him to a severe beating, which he later died from the injuries that the beatings caused. Now, the villagers are in a state of mourning and fear, which is common in Ambazonia's war-stricken zone, with the colonial forces carrying out this arbitrary act of murder. Locals expressed disillusionment, noting that Biya's armed men had been welcomed into their community with the hope of protection, not like they had any other choice. Anyways, the death had prompted a response from Ambazonian fighters who have allegedly imposed a lockdown on the village until the circumstances surrounding the incident are clarified by tournament organizers. Now, according to critics, while the use of football as a unifying element in a war-torn nation highlights the deep-seated desire for normalcy and peace, the violence against civilians by colonial military men, however, remains a persistent issue. The French Cameroon army is notorious for committing atrocities including torture, extrajudicial killings, and abductions, with civilians often caught in the crossfire or specifically targeted in most cases. Now, as of the time of this report, the colonial military had not issued a statement regarding the happenings, which is not all new. It is not new in Ambazonia, where the colonial forces have repeatedly turned community gatherings, once meant for peace and unity, into scenes of terror and mourning. The killing of Desire Kwakeki reflects a troubling pattern of brutality, where civilians are routinely misidentified on purpose, tortured, and killed under the guise of counter-insurgency. Well, such acts of violence further deepen the mistrust, fuels resistance, and undermines any prospects of peace, leaving ordinary Ambazonians trapped in a cycle of fear and grief. We have in the studio with us Barrister Mbeseha. Good evening, Barrister, and welcome.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure. Where we begin the news of tonight from the home front with a very familiar scenario. Another mistake, identification, and killing of an innocent Ambazonian youth. Well, just leave the floor to you to give your thoughts on this recent happening, this time not at a bar, sadly at a football tournament. And the question lies, is there now anywhere safe for Ambazonian youths in southern Cameroon? That is the question that begs to be answered. Barrister Mbeseha, I will leave the floor to you.
Well, again, this is not the case of mistaken identity. If you come out with a narrative of a mistaken identity, it means that those guys, they have some right to look for somebody, the rightful person, and torture the guy to death. Now, it was not a question of mistaken identity. As far as torture is concerned, let it be known to everybody in the world, torture is outlawed internationally. Maybe we don't understand what torture is, as distinct from other ways of fighting crime. Torture is when the victim is already in your control. You don't torture somebody who's running away. Like in other instances, they shoot them. That's murder. But once the person is under your control, you've captured the guy for whatever reason you think, you cannot then take the law into your hands. Gradually kill him, because torture is gradual. You bend his neck, you break his bones, you cheat his head or whatever, until the man eventually dies. That's torture. It is not acceptable anywhere in the world. And so that is wrong. It is an international crime for which that guy should be prosecuted. But then let us go to the circumstances under which this guy was even taken into custody. There was something they call a football tournament. Since when did football become the lifeline of our society? What is football? Soccer. What is soccer? Entertainment. It's a game. It's purely a game. There are only 22 players kicking that thing left and right. And any other person is just a spectator, clapping when you want, jumping when you want, out of excitement. We didn't know football until one man came with that sport. They would not have sports before. We had to have entertainment. We did. And so why has this football team become an obsession? It's not only in Biya. I see it everywhere in Ghana, in Ambazonia, in Manu, in the BLM, everywhere they are trying to organize football tournaments to show a return to normalcy. Why? Because the youths are falling for that nonsense. If you win a football match, you're the hero of the world. If somebody is in charge of football, call him Mr. Otto. He's the king of the country. Because football looks like the game that everybody wants to hear. And so these people should not even have gone there. But back again to the torture. These guys have no reason, no right in any form or shape to torture somebody to death. Once in their custody, if that guy has committed a crime, follow the formalities, charge him or her to court, and the justice will take its course. But when you take the law into your hand, which is not a singular action, as Uriah said, no communication has come from that department. Don't expect one. If anyone came out, it will become a congratulated guy for killing somebody they believed, mistakenly though, to be an Amba fighter. Since when did they get the license to kill whoever is called Amba? Where did the license come from? We've had these occasions in Biya and other places. Shoot on sight if that guy is suspected to be an Amba. If the name Amba become criminal to face death for that, and why the code name was Amba in the first place? Amba is just an English-speaking somebody. It's because he calls himself Ambazonia. Who are you? You are really somebody from Biya. That guy is a Biya guy. Or you're somebody from Mbeseha. You have a father, you have a mother, you have a home, you have a place where you can be identified. So again, since when did they criminalize the word Amba to the point that people will take their guns bought by taxpayers with taxpayers' money, and shoot others to death for suspecting them for being Amba? This is not acceptable. These people must be held accountable either locally or internationally. Either way, it is coming. Sooner or later, it will come. And so those guys, what we need is to keep a proper record of what has happened. What is a proper record? We need to know the precise place where it happened. We know the names of the victims in full. And we know the circumstances under which he was killed. If possible, and very, very possible, we know the guys who adopted him, who captured him. Then they can expect justice to follow them. And it will follow them until they die. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Barrister Mbeseha, for that insight and contribution. Well, we still see a lot of concerns within Ambazonia, like a recent resident of Molyko in Biya, chief town of the Atlantic Zone, who has voiced deep frustration over the mismanagement of La Republique's national ID card application process at the Colonial Police Station. Now, despite a scheduled appointment, the applicant was allegedly turned away, while another individual without an appointment was attended to immediately. Now, this has exposed the ineffectiveness of the colonial government's official appointment system and fairness in the procedure, showing more sides of possibly bribery and corruption. Now, an individual who had a confirmed appointment at 2:30 p.m. on August 19, 2025 for ID card processing at the Molyko Police Station arrived hours early, hoping to be attended to in a timely manner. But then at 1:30 p.m., an individual clad in a colonial police attire informed the waiting crowd that no documents would be collected for the day anymore, invalidating their pre-scheduled appointments and forcing them to return the next day. Now, the applicant, who wishes to remain anonymous, was left shocked and disappointed, stating that their official appointment time was completely disregarded. The frustration was compounded by the fact that they witnessed a man who had only just completed his online pre-enrollment form and had an appointment scheduled for the next week, yet he was processed immediately. Now, this apparent disregard for the official appointment system has led to serious concerns among citizens, exposing the discrepancies in the application process, where established procedures seem to be ignored in favor of arbitrary decisions, and looking at the colonial system historical pattern, very possibly bribe. The experience has prompted several other individuals to question the chain of command and responsibility. They asked whether the blame for such unprofessional and unfair treatment should fall on Martin Mbaga Ngwele, the Colonial Delegate General for National Security, or on the 92-year-old frail colonial president Biya, who La Republic claims is appointing these officials who manage the Molyko Colonial Police Station. Meanwhile, the population believes this incident only underscores a wider issue of public trust accountability within the colonial regime civil service, particularly concerning the fairness and transparency of supposed official procedures. Now, Barrister Mbeseha, we know that the colonial system, even the colonial system in southern Cameroon and any part of the Cameroons is a failed one and it's in total chaos. And that is one reason why La Republic has been termed the Banana Republic. Now, the question is, what is your advice concerning these colonial ID cards, bearing in mind that most times Ambazonians are assaulted, harassed, and accused of being part of the Ambazonian fighters for not having these colonial ID? Now, what do you advise the population to do in this case, seeing that even getting it, the process of getting it is overly cumbersome and there is a picture of segregation, whether intentional or by the default structure of a failed colonial system? What do you advise the population of Ambazonia to do with regards to these colonial IDs?
I think the question, the victims, the citizens victims, because ID is posed on them. They are because they are the issuers. They have no control over the service that issues them. Are you getting it?
Now I can hear you, sir.
I was saying as victim, the citizens can do nothing about it because the ID is a government issue. The people are government agents. But the victims are not victims. They're victims for whatever, but we can agree on one common thing. The idea of ID, the process to get it or not to give it to you, has become something purely commercial. If the government expects you to have an ID, they should make it possible for you to have it. People should not leave their jobs and stand on these lines, as you've seen a queue there, waiting for something they call an ID. What is difficult in getting IDs? What's actually difficult there? It's not difficult to give you an ID if they want to give one. But they will not give you one because they know that if they didn't give you that ID in that Molyko office, by the time you get to Biya, they will reach 2 checkpoints, 3 checkpoints. Enough. Asking for ID that they know that you don't have. And of course, in return, you are going to money to buy your own freedom to move on the road for not having a paper that they're supposed to give you. It's not even free. It is a paper that you go back home the next evening, early in the morning, they come and hit their door and open the door and catch you and call it Kale Kale and ask you to produce it. They take it to the field, they torture you, and then of course you give them money to go free. If not having an ID is a crime in Cameroon, all my life over there, I've saw very few, if any, who was ever brought to court for not having an ID. But millions don't have it. They settle on the road for them. Why is this thing so difficult, if not deliberately made to suffer the population? The idea of having government IDs or IDs is not start with Cameroon. Most countries around the world have IDs. Where I live, and in most other places in the United States, it takes you less than 30 minutes to go apply for an ID, sit there, it is processed and cut and given to you. You leave. You don't take an appointment to come there and go the next day. No. If you must go back home, you're not coming back there for 8, they will mail it to you in your address. Why can't Cameroon do same. What possible there? Why are we doing it here? That cheap and that straightforward. We're using machines. These machines are so in technology that can be installed anywhere. It can be installed in Funkanka, in Mimboman, in Samilium. It can be installed anywhere. So why they make it impossible to have it? It's a deliberate idea to torture people. Coming from the top, that guy sitting there, whoever I call it, is more than 80-something years old. Does he even have an idea of what an ID is? He has an idea. His own ID is a carton paper that they used to cut and give people in 1958. That's his own notion of an ID. So how do you expect to make this Opa, great-grandfather, in charge of giving people modern IDs? His director and so on are more than 80-70 years old. And so it is a calculated attempt to extort money from people, not even attempt, a calculated plan through which they extort money from people in different forms. On the highway, for not having it, you not even travel in the car. You ask you to travel in the bus. If you don't have, you have to fish it your way around and get 500 francs, get 1,000. So it is it's not something that, bottom line, if the Cameroon government wants to give people ID, it should make it possible for them to have that. There's nothing the civilian can do. You take your own ID. Now can you stop them from getting you off of their bed and saying that they want to make a Kale to catch your ID? Now can you prevent them from stopping the cars on the road and pulling you out and say you don't have an ID or you have anything related to ID? And so I think it is the failure of the system. It is why we must leave this system. We did not need to do. People should not be standing in Molyko for days and find a long line there. At the end of the day, not even picking a piece of paper. You start on the line, you queue, you walk in, they say there's nothing for you here, you go back home. You have spent the whole day there. And on your way home, they stop the bus or the taxi and say, bring an ID. There's no excuse that you went there, you didn't find your own. You pay the money before you go. And so that's the corrupt system, too corrupt for anybody to tolerate. And so Ambazonians have said bye-bye to that. And we're not coming back to it. We'll have better IDs if we must. We'll have the better procedure to get them if we should.
All right, Barrister Mbeseha, thank you for that input there. It is well said, and it's quite ironic, just as you mentioned, that even after Ambazonians get these IDs, the excuse they give before is, oh, you do not have an ID, that means you must be affiliated to the Ambazonian fighters. But then when they get it, they still raid Ambazonian territories in their Kali Act. And it's almost like there is no safe space for Ambazonians. As long as you bear the identity of a Southern Cameroon, you seem to be a pawn in this callous and genocidal game of the colonial military. Well, we see that the Secretary of State for Communications and IT, Dr. Martin Mungwa, has released an editorial. The editorial from the Voice of Ambazonia addressing the mystery surrounding Cameroonian President Paul Biya's absence from public life, especially as the 2025 presidential election approaches. Despite being 92 years old and unseen for months, his candidacy was submitted by proxies, raising serious concerns about transparency and leadership in Yaoundé. Speculation about his health or possible death continues, with unofficial sources suggesting that he may no longer be alive, while the Cameroonian government maintains a conspicuous silence. The piece by the Secretary of State for Communications and IT, Dr. Martin Mungwa, criticizes what it calls a media stunt by the regime, possibly setting the stage for a manipulated election by showcasing Biya in a controlled appearance to maintain the illusion of his leadership. It underscores the long-standing issues of authoritarianism, corruption, and human rights abuses under Paul Biya's rule, which has lasted for over 6 decades. The editorial views the entire electoral process as fraudulent and disconnected from the realities on the ground. Before Ambazonians, the editorial makes it clear that this political drama in Yaoundé is not their concern. It emphasizes that Ambazonia is not part of Cameroun and rejects the legitimacy of the upcoming election with a rallying cry. Let's take a listen.
This is the voice of Ambazonia. Truth in resistance, clarity in crisis. Today is Tuesday, August 26, 2025. Today's editorial is titled, Paul Biya, Stop This Comic Show. Fellow Ambazonians, greetings. For months now, the people of La Republique of Cameroun have been left in the dark about their leader. Paul Biya has not been seen in public for a long time. When it came time to submit his candidacy for the 2025 presidential election, he was not there. Instead, proxies filed a paperwork on his behalf. This leaves us with the million-dollar question, where is Paul Biya? Rumors continue to spread. A YouTube channel, Info du Monde, claims the 92-year-old is no more. No independent source has confirmed this. But what is striking is the silence from Yaoundé. Instead of clarity, France has sent a retired general as ambassador, a sign they are preparing for turbulence. Meanwhile, fake online newspapers are busy showing young Cameroonians pledging to vote for Paul Biya. Yet, amid all the noise, the most important voice is missing, the incumbent himself. Ambazonians should not be surprised if he suddenly reappears, looking like a man just flown in for a staged visit. Very likely, this is all part of a media stunt designed to create election buzz to pretend he is still capable of ruling for 7 more years. But let us be clear, no one is impressed. Biya's record of authoritarianism, corruption, and bloodshed speaks louder than any stage appearance. At 92, Biya has been in power since 1982, and if you count his earlier government years since 1962, he has ruled for nearly 7 decades. Whether he is alive or not, whether he shows up or not, Yaoundé has already selected him for another 7 years. Brothers and sisters, this is not Ambazonia's affair. We are not part of Cameroon's fraudulent selections and never will be. Whatever comedy unfolds in Yaoundé, Ambazonia remains free, determined, and unshaken. Let our message ring across every town and village. No selection in Ambazonia, and Ambazonia is free. Whatever trick the regime plays, Ambazonia marches forward to freedom. From the voice of Ambazonia, this has been today's editorial.
Why he is the voice of Ambazonia couldn't have been said any better. But then let's take a look at the theatrics going on with La Republique and its upcoming election. We know that for decades, La Republique du Cameroun has perfected the art of selection in the name of election, a ritualized script that recycles power while dressing it up as renewal. Across those same decades, Ambazonia has been held under military siege. Its people urge not just military, but also political siege, but its people urged and then bullied into watching the spectacle and mistaking it for the substance of democracy. Each cycle comes with a fresh tactics to blur the real front line, which is the fight for liberation, not the performance of participation. Yet the true line remains that Ambazonia has risen above colonial deception and is forging its path to self-determination. The focus is Biya, not a 2D.
Cameroun has over 32,000 polling stations nationwide. Some months ago, the SDF uncovered a serious problem in which more than 1,100 of these 32,000 polling stations were discovered to have been placed inside military barracks and palaces, places where ordinary citizens could never feel free to vote. The SDF fought back and secured a decisive victory by forcing Elicum to relocate those polling stations to safer public spaces where every Cameroonian can vote without fear and intimidation. Now, the SDF is already far advanced in the next and even bigger battle, recruiting and training over 96,000 polling agents, 3 for every polling station, to stand guard and secure your vote on October 12. After relocating these polling stations to safer and public places, it is a must to protect your vote, because your vote is your voice, your hope, your power. You have waited 7 long years to make your voice heard. But a vote not protected can be a vote stolen. That's why the Social Democratic Front, the SDF, is building the largest network of polling station agents our country has ever seen. 96,000 polling agents. 3 agents for every single one of Cameroon's 32,000 polling stations. Here's how it works. When you vote, the official tally at your polling station is recorded in a document called the PV. Our polling agents keep a copy of that PV. From there, the results flow step by step from the polling station to the local council tallies, then to the regional tallies, and finally to the national Elecam tally center. If every PV is recorded and secured at the very first stage, it becomes extremely difficult for anyone to manipulate the numbers later. The SDF already has over 40,000 brave polling station agents. But we still need many more polling agents before Election Day. In 2018, over 45% of registered voters did not show up to vote. But this year, the SDF says no to voter apathy. Do not be discouraged. If you are a registered voter, show up and vote on October 12.
Well, while we say good luck to French Cameroun, we cannot help but notice the latest iteration of this well-worn play, Joshua O.C., who is Ambazonian by origin but aligned by affiliation and actions with French Cameroun, has carried on with his familiar campaign of selling participation in colonial elections as a civic duty and a national fix. Well, his party, the SDF, now touts a sweeping operational push. 96,000 polling station agents by election day, with over 40,000 already identified and trained. The figure is big, the messaging bigger. Trust the process this time will be different. How sure is he about that, really? But that Ambazonian analysts counter that volume isn't exactly legitimacy. 40 plus years of an unchanged outcome is not cured by a headcount of polling agents when the core architecture remains the same. Executive dominance, securitized politics, and a judiciary questioned for independence. Expanding the logistics only widens the stage. It doesn't deepen the franchise. To many Ambazonians, this is democracy by optics. Teach the audience the choreography and keep the script untouched. But then we can only say good luck to French Cameroun in their hopes for a free and fair election, but nothing of concern exactly to the southern Cameroon's Ambazonia. Now, if the airwaves are full of participation arguments, the ground in southern Cameroon tells a different story. Bello Buba Maigari attempted to campaign in Manu and met a wall. The senior divisional officer halted the move and the local population sealed it with an unmistakable verdict: no. Let's take a look.
De Maïkanga, la marée verte de l'UNDP avec le président ne voulait passer, le sous-préfet a bloqué la route, donc la population s'est levée, et vous allez voir ce qui va se passer là après. Voilà. Donc c'est à la rentrée de Maïkanga comme ça, à cause de la marée verte de l'UNDP, la foule immense qui attendait le président Bello à la rentrée comme ça, et le sous-préfet a bloqué la route, et la population a dit non, on doit enlever son dans sa voiture sur la route. C'est ça qui est là.
Well, reasons abound, and they are neither petty nor new. First of all, you might wonder, well, it's not a wonder at this point why Ambazonians might want to react that way. We'll take a look at the neglect of the grassroots of especially southern Cameroons until campaign season. Politicians who vanish after elections and reappear only when votes are needed are finding doors shut. Perceived estrangement, ties to the colonial political machinery render such figures strangers even when they trace origin to the land. In the people's eyes, indigeneity requires solidarity, not just ancestry. A declared policy line also with the Ambazonian authorities have been empathetic. Colonial elections are a no-go in southern Cameroon, and the Ambazonian government couldn't be any emphatic than they already have been. And that position isn't a momentary mood. It is the product of years of militarization, mass displacement, shuttered schools, and communities surviving under occupation and genocide. The takeaway is simple. Where the rhetoric of inclusive national politics tries to move in, the lived memory of exclusion and violence pushes back. Campaign caravans cannot roll over unresolved grievances. Ballot boxes cannot absorb bullet burnings and the long silence after crisis. La Republique's election season reliably offers new costumes for an old script. Well, this year's twist, oversized operational numbers, participation drives, surprise candidacies doesn't break the pattern. It confirms it. Against that, Ambazonia's line has sharpened, not softened. The fate of southern Cameroons will not be altered in Yaoundé's ballot. The compass points to Biya, to sovereignty, accountability, and a political order built for and by southern Cameroon's Ambazonians. While La Republique rehearses election as election, Ambazonia refuses that part. The theater continues, but then the audience has moved on. Now, Barrister Mbeseha, there is another side to all of this. Ambazonians have watched with growing concern the political gymnastics, especially that of another Southern Cameroonian-born Barrister Akerimuna, whom only days ago he was petitioning at the Constitutional Court of French Cameroon to bar Paul Biya from contesting, and now he has turned around calling for a coalition with Cabra Libi, Isaac Roma, Joshua Osei, men deeply embedded in the colonial political system. Many Ambazonians now view Barrister Akerimuna not just as confused, but also as a Confucianist, deliberately muddying the waters. Now, there are so many questions looking at this particular report, one of which is how do you interpret this sudden shift from Biya Akerimuna, from petitioning Paul Biya and now coming to a coalition? How do you interpret the sudden shift, and what does it reveal about the desperation and contradictions within the colonial electoral theater?
Well, it's difficult to deal with candidates like Akerimuna because, this is my opinion, Akerimuna is just a political adventurer. Yeah, he's a candidate. The party that put him up there, he was never even a member of that party. He never belonged to the party. The party just put him up to become a candidate. Why? Because they wanted to make him relevant. They wanted to use his entity to be an Anglophone there, to be a lawyer who is fighting corruption. Akerimuna knows that he will not win. There's no way he will win. That's not his first adventure. He had been there before. He was in 2018, put up as a candidate. At the last minute, he withdrew and supported Kamto. Kamto did not win. And we all know what Kamto not to win. And so is what Akerimuna is saying irrelevant today. Now. Because unfortunately, he has read the red line. He knows what Cameroon is. When he took his case there as an individual a few days ago, he knew that he was not going to win. He's not a new person to the so-called Constitutional Council. He's not a stranger there. That thing has been there forever. And he's not a new guy to the electoral election process in Cameroon. And so that's why I call them just charade, the adventurers, together with Osei. Osei is telling you, go and participate, there will be a PV at the polling station. Who told him that? Isn't that the very PV that went to 2018? And the elecom said, sorry, the Constitutional Council said, look, the all PV we want here, that we consider is one from Eleka. So when Mr. Osi's PV Sakara in his suit to the Constitutional Council, and they are all in contradiction to what Eleka has given. Based on precedent, how are they going to take him? How are they going to accept? See, the fine prints of elections in Cameroon that people don't want to say, which is what they're benefiting from. It's just money. It's money. Elections in Cameroon, especially presidential elections in Cameroon are American venture. Not stolen money, no. The government pulls money from the treasury to give you if you're a candidate. Millions. You are not required to give an account of how the money was spent. You take it and go, that's it. It has been like that forever. And so, I mean, they all know that they will not win. They want to be relevant in the society called Cameroon. That's not our problem. Our problem is not there. Our problem is how they try to induct our own children there. Our problem is how they bring our own parents, even by adoption, call them chiefs, who will move to Yaoundé and say they support Paul Biya for the sake of making money out of it, because they don't go to Yaoundé for nothing. Our problem is how they will get our priests and bishops and pastors to go to Yaoundé and say we want to talk about elections. They will never see Paul Biya, but they will come back home with their pockets full of money. Our problem is how our own brothers and sisters who have a certain level of reading and age will go and manipulate the population. For example, just an illustration. In Kupe where there's absolutely nothing there. And they say, look, the people of the youth have contributed 20, 40 million to support Paul Biya. Which youth, they have never even seen Paul Biya in their lifetime, and they will never see him. Which chiefs, they call them, be them from Boya or from Bamenda, call them Regional House of Chiefs, will take a wooden structure they have carved themselves, or made it by themselves, and take it to a 2D. They say this Paul Biya lives in a 2D. He's supposed to live there. Then when they go there to support a statue, they have carved the statue that they're going to support to become the president. This is where the problem is. The problem is how you see somebody standing in Boya. We were talking in the last segment about where the referral hospital. You see somebody standing in Boya and wearing something on his body and carrying ribbons. He's a mayor. Accompanying a fraudulent minister and claiming that they are launching the the construction of a referral hospital. That's one of us. He's not a stranger to the town. This is where the problem is. And the question we always ask is, when shall Ambazonians learn to say no to fraud? When shall they be able to stand out and say, no, we can no longer accept this? Nobody is new to the Cameroon so-called managed elections or selections, or whatever they call it. Is the difference between what OC is doing now and what Nifron did in 1992 and won the election. Where is the Nifron this election victory of 1992? That was supposed to be sponsored called SDF, which SDF OC is the headman over it now. So these are all gangsters trying to get money directly, cash, that is being used to sponsor elections, and getting positions in the long run that will put them in places. Most particularly, for example, OC. OC is here, he does business. He hires planes, representatives to Geneva or wherever and kept on the ground for months. And they pay him. That is what is important. That these people to use their own personal fortunes to deceive the people, to deceive us, to deceive the next generation. Probably might be alive or dead. But a presidential candidate is not based on the fact that you're sitting in your kitchen and eating bread and drinking wine. It's based on the fact that they see you standing outside there, giving election promises. If you vote me, I will do this. If you vote me, I will do it. Based on speculation and imagination that the man must be alive or dead. No. That's the other country in the world who have seen elections where candidates never show up anywhere. But at the end of the day, they win. Where they make ministers to run the government for them, which ministers never even meet with them. for 7 years of their mandate. No, no. Enough is enough. Ambazonia has taken too much of this nonsense. Good enough. We have one blessing, that today we have the social media, and there's no place where the President Biya can hide. There's no place where OC will hide. There's no place where Akere or whoever, any other candidate would hide. They are lying to themselves. There will be no elections in Cameroon. There will be a selection which has already been done. Biya has already been selected to be president. It is not for us to choose to change their choice. But if we can give advice to our Cameroonians, not Ambazonia, to Cameroonians, how long will you take this? How? The government that you deserve. Out, fight for what you want to fight, remain doomed forever. We are not going to go down the drains with Ambazonians. Ambazonians have said enough is enough. We are gone. No matter what it costs, we are gone. We will rebuild and be better than what we have been in the past 60, 70 years. Over to you.
Thank you, Barrister Mbeseha, for your contributions in the entire news of today. But that will be it from the home front. Thank you for joining in. Up next will be news across Africa. Do stay tuned. Well, on the African scene, on Tuesday, a wave of concern swept through Uganda. Citizens and lawmakers questioned the government's recent agreement with the United States to receive deported migrants. Critics highlighted a glaring lack of parliamentary oversight and expressed suspicion that the deal may serve to ease international pressure on President Yoweri Museveni's increasingly authoritarian regime. Details of the agreement remain scarce. Ugandan officials have offered only limited information, stating that the country is primarily willing to accept deportees of African origin. They also emphasize that individuals with criminal records would not be welcomed. Yet the ambiguity surrounding the deal has sparked anxiety among civil society groups, opposition leaders, and legal experts, who fear that Uganda is being used as a political dumping ground without appropriate legal or humanitarian safeguards. Adding to the controversy is the potential transfer of Kilma Abrego Garcia, a high-profile detainee from El Salvador who has been charged with involvement in human smuggling operations. His possible relocation to Uganda has intensified the public outcry as it challenges the government's stated preference for African deportees and raises questions about whether Uganda is being pressured into accepting non-African individuals with serious criminal charges. Legal analysts argue that any international agreement of this nature requires parliamentary approval under Ugandan law. The fact that this agreement was made without legislative scrutiny raises constitutional concerns and suggests a troubling lack of accountability. Furthermore, human rights advocates worry that Uganda's cooperation with the United States could be used to improve the Museveni administration's international image and deflect criticism over domestic repression, including crackdowns on dissent, media freedom, and political opposition. As the story unfolds, many Ugandans are demanding greater transparency and urging the government to disclose the full terms of the agreement. There are growing calls for parliamentary debate, public consultation, and legal review before any deportees are received under the deal. And that will be it on the African scene. But coming up next will be news across the globe. Well, on the foreign scene, Australia has officially severed diplomatic relations with Iran following serious allegations that Tehran orchestrated anti-Semitic attacks within Australian borders. The Australian government, after a detailed investigation by the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ASIO, concluded that Iran was directly involved in a series of targeted assaults against Jewish communities and institutions. The investigation traced these attacks back to the Iranian regime, specifically linking them to Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. According to Australian intelligence assessment, at least 2 incidents, an attack on a kosher food company in Sydney in October and an attack on a synagogue in Melbourne in December, were not isolated acts of hate, but rather coordinated operations directed by Iranian authorities. Authorities say the attacks were part of a broader campaign targeting Jewish Australians, including businesses, religious sites, and high-profile individuals within the Jewish community. ASIO's efforts reportedly revealed a clear connection between the perpetrators of these crimes and high-level operatives within the IRGC, suggesting a deliberate strategy by Iran to undermine and intimidate Jewish interests on Australian soil. Well, as a result of these findings, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced the breakdown of diplomatic ties, marking a significant escalation in Australia's stance towards Iran. The decision shows the gravity with which the Australian government views foreign interference and acts of politically motivated violence against minority communities. And that was it for tonight's Undaunted. But before we go, let's take a look at our major headlines. Well, on Undaunted tonight, we brought to you French Cameroon's military torturing unarmed civilian to death in Biya County, as well as ID card frustrations mounting at Molyko Colonial Police Station over colonial ID cards. And the voice of Ambazonia, Secretary of State Dr. Martin Mungwa, talks about Paul Biya and the comic show in the elections. Ambazonia also rejects the La Republique's 2025 election theater as Joshua Osei sells participation to a disillusioned public. And on the African scene, Uganda's questioned United States deportation agreement amid lack of transparency and political concerns. And on the foreign news, we saw Australia caught in ties with Iran over state-directed anti-Semitic attacks on Jewish sites. And that was it for tonight's Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. On behalf of the entire Undaunted, we say thank you for tuning in. Leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.